You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who's always walked your own path, but now feel like you've lost your way, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you back to yourself and to help you reconnect with your joy, your passion, and your purpose. Midlife knocked me sideways. I was not prepared for all the challenges that piled up one by one. Everything in my life felt like it was imploding, including my health and my sense of self. By the time I hit 50, I was completely lost. But here's the good part. I'm finding my way, and so can you. I'll be dropping episodes every Thursday on everything from ambivalent aging, to body changes, to relationship shifts, to career challenges, financial fears, crazy family dynamics, and spiritual awakenings. Some weeks I'll be musing, some weeks I'll be ranting, and sometimes I'll have amazing guests who will share their expertise with you. Midlife brings a lot of change and a lot of challenges, but there's also so much magic to be uncovered. Let's dive in. I vividly remember my first encounter with playwright, producer, choreographer, and actor Kate Valentine. It was my 30th birthday, and I was celebrating at Fez, a venue in New York City. She was performing as her hilarious, deadpan alter ego Miss Astrid. She's an instigator of the neo-feminist burlesque movement, and her show, the vaudeville extravaganza, the Va Va Voom Room, launched the careers of hundreds of noted burlesque performers, musicians, and variety artists. She has traveled all over the world entertaining audiences with her quick wit and unmatched improv chops. More recently, Kate has created a solo show, A Woman of a Certain Rage, which marks her joyous return to the stage and her first full-length one-woman show. It captures the zeitgeist, speaking for Gen X women entering menopause and refusing to become invisible in midlife. So talk to me about the development of this one-woman show. What's the impetus? What was the impetus and the inspiration?
Well, it's interesting. I wanted to create more opportunities for myself to perform. And, most of my work has been not of a personal nature. It's doing characters and doing character-based comedy. And that's where I feel really at home. But I think something about entering into midlife it's changed my perspective on a lot of things. And one of the things, I feel like you were talking about it, Kate, when you were saying that entering midlife or entering menopause is like walking through a door. I'm paraphrasing you. I don't know exactly. How did you?
I said it's a portal, into your next self. And
right.
Walking through it, when you get to that threshold, you don't know who you're going to be after.
Right. So I feel like this in some way aligns with that, in that I feel in my midlife a strong desire to be of use and say something that's important and resonant and something that's larger than myself. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I value comedy as like laughter as a way of getting through life, and healing is, in my opinion, the only way to get through. And this show is funny, but it's also addressing trauma and healing from trauma, and the necessity, I believe, for women to turn their anger, that often, I think, women aren't a monolith, but often anger can be suppressed or turned inward. And my thesis is that if that anger was turned outwards, that's a righteous amount of energy that could be turned outwards towards a goal. And I think the world needs female energy. And I think that menopause, this time of, invisibility, is in fact our time to step into our power.
Absolutely. And we came of age during a time where so many things that we should have been angry about were just normal and expected. I feel
Right.
like,
Well, we're Gen X kids, right?
right,
So,
I'm 53.
yeah.
I resonated so much when I watched the clips about like your parent, like your dad sending you for cigarettes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that too, and no one knew where we were. No one cared. And not only did they not know where we were, they didn't care where we were, really. My
Right.
parents were like, they were having their cocktails at 4:30, 5 o'clock. If
Yeah.
I said that some guy had bothered me on the street or whatever, we were over sexualized at a young age, no matter where you were, what didn't matter. It was nothing to do with like who you were. It was just the way men treated you. And if you came back with a complaint, it was like, well, just ignore him.
Right. Right. Then this is in my show. My mother said, if there's ever anything that bothers you, if you've been hurt, just shove it down. Shove it down where no one will ever find it. Like keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Words to live by, right? But as a kid, and especially a latchkey kid, maybe Gen X kids, 70s kids, like you everything was DIY. So you figured out your own ways to resolve whatever, hard knocks have come your way, right? You got through it somehow with music or with I don't know what,
Right.
pick your poison, right? But I think if you're going to age and age well, at some point you've got to reassess your coping mechanisms, right? It's like, okay, that got me through it. I survived, but it, it was kind of like, you know, gum and I don't know, like matchsticks, it wasn't a
Yeah.
real sustainable system for thriving.
Right. Just because you
And
tape yourself back together with some duct tape and some gum doesn't mean you're functioning.
yeah, yeah. So, you have to, life is cyclical. And unfortunately, if things aren't repaired well, you have to go back and re-repair them somehow. But again, I think that, and there's certain, things that were presented maybe as facts of life for women, that, those are just things that you have to go through as a woman. But I think we have a big opportunity now as women in our 50s to really, take ownership of all of that in a new way. Like the problem, I think most people would agree that one of the systemic problems in our society is patriarchy. But if it's just something that happens to you, you're like, oh, well, I can just deal with it myself. I'll just take care of it. But if once you realize it's something that's happening to everybody, somehow that makes you, it gives you more, it empowers you to push back hopefully in meaningful ways. And so I guess that's part of what I'm trying to get to with this show.
Yeah. But you were pushing back even when I became aware of you. You were.
Yeah.
I first went to the slipper room, or I got introduced to the neo-burlesque scene on my 30th birthday. I was a baby social worker. I decided to have a 30th birthday party, and there's a picture of me with you at Fez.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, you have to share it with me. I would love to see it.
Oh my God. It's
One of
I mean,
those like Polaroids after the show.
no, it's like on film. It's like the worst pictures because they were taken on film. Someone's finger is in there, they're overexposed. Everyone was drunk, like I'm like on the table with a knife.
That sounds like the best picture to me. I don't know what you're talking about. That
But I
sounds like the kind of picture we need.
seeing you, it was you and Bob and Julie Atlas Muse and Dirty.
Yeah.
Maybe the Lady Ace.
Hmm.
And I don't remember what the show was called.
Well, the show was my show. It was the Va Va Voom Room.
There you go.
Yeah, it was the show that I started producing in the 90s in Los Angeles, and I brought it to New York. And my dream venue was to have it be at Fez, because I went to see Kiki and Herb there, and I just fell in love with that space. And then they offered me a slot, and I had a weekly show there for more than 5 years, and it was dreamy. It was really the very well, arguably. I mean, it was the beginning of like the real excitement about neo-burlesque. Yeah. And it's funny, I was thinking about Miss Astrid and how Miss Astrid began. And Miss Astrid is a very different persona from myself, but I think that in some way, I mean, I always approached burlesque as a feminist action, which I'm happy to talk about more, but specifically with the MC character of Miss Astrid, it's playing with the idea of being not being a likable female, you know? As Kate, I'm desperate to be liked. But Miss Astrid was not, Miss Astrid, severe and harsh and did not give a fuck. And that was not a conscious thing that I was playing with when I started the character, but more and more I see that, this one woman show is somehow about likability, and Miss Astrid was definitely about pushing against that standard for women.
Right. But what I admire about, and I think this threads to what the work you're doing now, but what I admired so much about the neo-burlesque scene was people creating their own opportunity and their own world. And as a woman,
absolutely,
I'm told just fit in, just find a spot, find your little spot on a path, any path, and it's a predetermined thing. And what I saw right when I was, to graduate from social work school with my predetermined path was, oh my God, people are creating their own worlds where they get to be whoever they want to be.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Right. The potential for liberation is just massive. And so how long between the time that you saw your first show to the time that you were doing Rhinestone Follies?
8 years.
Uh-huh. But were you a fan? Like, were you
Yeah.
going to a bunch of shows leading up to that point?
Yeah, I went to all the shows. I had been a nightlife performer before I
Oh, I
went to
see.
social work
Okay.
school. I worked at the Limelight and all those places.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is silly. This isn't really happening. This is not really a thing. I got to figure it out. I got to get a real job. So I went to grad
Right.
school. And then I stumbled on your show and neo burlesque in general. And I was like, you know what? Like, I don't have to just do this one thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that it's incredibly powerful I mean, people get involved in burlesque. There's lots of different kinds of burlesque, and people get into it for lots of different reasons, and maybe more than one reason at once. But I love women taking ownership over their own bodies and having agency over creating their own narratives of what's sexy or funny or tragic or whatever story you're building within those 3 minutes, right? You've got 3 minutes to tell a story, and it's in burlesque, it's your story, right? And of course burlesque has opened up to many different genders now, which is a positive thing, but it was at its onset, really a safe place for women to create their own identities outside this very oppressive and narrow narrative of what it means to be female, or the right kind of female.
The right kind of female. Yeah. And when you have a hand in creating something as you did, right, you have quite a big hand in creating what neo burlesque became. I guess like anything, once it gets to a certain point, it's not really in your control anymore, and you have to let it go and create something else, which is what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. And things take run their natural course, right? And it's correct for it to be that way. I mean, I was involved as a performing artist and a dancer prior to burlesque. I sort of stumbled into it and it became this huge zeitgeist. And I just rode that wave, right? And met all of these tremendous people. You know, it really transformed my life. But in my perspective, it's just one part of, you know, what I am interested in doing as a performer, as an artist. Yeah. So it's exciting for me to play different characters, create different worlds, talk about different subjects, you know, that may or may not, you know, align with burlesque.
Right. But I would also imagine it would be exciting as a working actress or someone who moved to New York with the dream of becoming like a Hollywood star or a Broadway star. Were you a theater person or a film person or both?
I did both, but theater was
You
really
were a theater person.
yeah.
So you
Yeah.
came here to be on Broadway, presumably, right?
Broadway was never in sight lines, but just to be a working performer. And for many of us, you know, burlesque was a way to keep going, to be performing more than you were auditioning, to not be cast according to type, you know, to have a little more control over your artistic, you know, there's the business, right? And there's the artistic part, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
those two things don't sync up very well.
Can you tell me a little bit of your backstory?
I grew up in Boston and I grew up in a family of artists. So I was always dancing and using theater as a refuge. I was a very shy kid, and that was my place of solace. And I always dreamt from the time I was swinging on the swings of the elementary school to move to New York City. And I went to NYU, and I didn't quite stay there. I did a stint on the West Coast pursuing acting stuff and then found my way back east.
You were in Velvet Hammer, right?
Yes. So when I was living out in Los Angeles, I was, you know, a moderately working young actor, and I was living in Los Feliz, and I was working at the Dresden. I don't know if you ever went to the Dresden with Marty and Elaine. I was living right across the street from the Dresden on North Vermont in my great studio apartment that had a Murphy bed. And the vintage place across the street had a sign one day looking to audition girls for a burlesque show. And I went, and I had almost no reference point for that at all. There was nothing like that happening. That's not true. I had seen Dutch Wiseman's Follies in New York maybe 6 months earlier, and it was very exciting. Anyway, so I went to East LA to a nightclub there called Jabberjaw, and I auditioned for Michelle Carr and Rita the Albert in this, you know, bar during the daytime. I had somehow like schlepped together a costume. I had schlepped together pasties, which I have no idea how. I mean, it's just none of that stuff existed. I mean, and this was before the internet, right? We were living in this kind of vacuum, and they let me into their show, and it was like the coolest girls ever. It was so intimidating. But then actually being a part of it was this homecoming to a type of feminism that I hadn't experienced firsthand, where it was all of these women in a room, but no one was making debasing talk about their bodies. You know, people were just owning themselves, owning their lives, sharing their own narratives. And it was so incredibly liberating to be in a space where it's just like, you know, when you're too close to something, like you don't see it. But once that buzz was gone, I noticed the silence of it. You know, I was like, oh, no one's talking shit about themselves, just as like a baseline funny way of like, you know, this kind of vernacular. It just wasn't in the room. And it wasn't a political thing. It wasn't anyone trying to prove a point. It just wasn't there. It was such a gift. And many of those people have become lifelong friends. I mean, this was in 1996.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. yeah, but their show only ran like they do these epic shows like once a year, these huge blowouts, like so glamorous, these big props and this extra long runway that ran down with these chandeliers. So glamorous. But I wanted to be performing more. So that's when I started my show, the Va Va Voom Room. And it was more vaudeville, more variety acts. And it was at this little club called Rudolfo's in Silver Lake because I was friends with some of the people that ran. There was a great drag night that happened at that club called Drag Strip 66, like an absolutely legendary, brilliant gathering of people. Anyway, so that's where I started my burlesque life and my MC character that I've done now for, I don't know, 30 years or something insane like that.
So when you got to the point where you were emceeing at Burlesque Hall of Fame, one of the things that struck me, and I was not really like, I was just more like peripheral in that whole scene, was the Legends Night. That was when my narrative about aging shifted a little bit.
Yes.
And
Yes.
women in their 70s and 80s on stage, often nude or partially nude,
Yes.
with walkers or a wheelchair, or
Yes.
was so mind-blowing to me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. The ability to interact and experience women who continued to express themselves sensually and sexually. I mean, you can't without experiencing that live. Like there is no way to overestimate the power of it. I mean, to me, that's just crystallizes exactly what is the best of burlesque,
Absolutely.
right? That
100%.
this is 100% about self-expression. It's about bearing your soul. It's not so much about being naked physically as more of a metaphorical nudity, right? And really getting down to what makes somebody attractive, right? And we all know in real human engagement, it's not about like who's hot. It's like so rarely that easily reductive, it's about, a whole conglomeration of things, right? And gosh, some of those women, I mean, my God, what really, really powerful, cool ladies.
Yeah, I think that really encapsulates it. Burlesque is about expanding your notion of sensuality and sexuality beyond the conventional expectations of hotness. Because I've been turned on seeing people on stage that were grabbing the attention and were captivating, but they were not Pamela Anderson or whatever we're
Right,
supposed to be.
right. I mean, Tourist Satana, Tourist Satana, Satan's Angel. I mean, these women are like just these powerhouses,
Yeah,
powerhouses of self-ownership and something inherently female, I would have to say. I just really gorgeous and so interesting to really be able to have the honor to get to know some of those people and talk to them at length. I mean, very interesting lives and very different. I mean, certainly, the difference between burlesque performers in the original incarnation and neo-burlesque. I mean, there's a huge gulf in the realities of those women's existences, why they were doing it, who they were doing it for.
right.
And all of that was worlds apart. But that sort of gut punch of a really strong performance is the same somehow.
Absolutely. Also, you get to create your own way, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Self-determining,
Yeah.
Is a huge thing.
Right. Right. And most of my work has ended up being, very experimental, which I love. But, I would also love to do a traditional play now and then. I mean, I'm up for anything, but, there's there's life and then there's what happens, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what your experience is like, but my life experience is like, there's your ideas and then there's what.
Sure. I mean, I'm certainly not doing anywhere near what I thought I would be doing on my first day of grad school. Like
Right.
I was going to be working with women with eating disorders. That was my goal.
Oh, wow. Well, did that inform your work in burlesque?
I think that's one of the reasons why I got into burlesque, because I still had
Hmm.
so much hangups and stuff around body image, body stuff. Unfortunately, I think one of those people that gravitated towards burlesque in a therapeutic way, which I think because I was never like a top tier person, it doesn't matter as much. But I think like it's more effective if you're aware of the audience and the audience's experience rather than your own, like, I'm here to heal myself. I'm here to heal myself. Like if you're just so focused on your own self-healing and you're not focused on the audience's experience, I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, it's, both of those things are valuable. It depends on your audience. If you have an audience of like-minded people who are on similar journeys, then that's like a beautiful thing to be able to share. Right. I mean, there's so many, burlesque is refracted off into so many different parts and pieces. Right. And if it makes people feel better about themselves, I mean, what could be bad about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. So talk to me about your new work and what you're working on now, and how you're hoping that this show will shift the narrative for people around aging, what it means to age as a woman, what it means to be a Gen X woman who's now aging. Because I don't think any of us thought we were really going to age. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really loving how many people of our age group are standing up, and I guess I feel surprised by it, but not surprised at the same time because it's so in keeping with the sort of the ethos of the Gen X people. I mean, it's like I feel like there's so many women who are like, "Fuck this!" Like, why why has no one told me anything? Why isn't anybody talking about this? And so I feel that wave of our generation really blazing a path towards a better understanding of how female bodies work and how female bodies change. And I think that's only going to be good for us and empowering for the generations to come, because there has been a lot of secrecy around what happens.
Oh yeah.
And that's not helping anybody, right? And then there's the bias in the medical industry, and this is a big part of my show as well, because I have personally suffered abuses at the hands of the medical system. And I think that, unfortunately, I think that's a common occurrence for women. I think that we, in small ways and large ways, are victimized by the Western medical system, because, at the very least, because our bodies are not given equal time and equal attention and equal research. At worst, because, women are sometimes treated like second-class citizens, right? Yeah, it would be great if we could step beyond all of that.
That would be great. I'm seeing less and less and less people pretending to be young when they're no longer young.
Mm,
I feel like
mm.
X is the first group of people. They're like, yeah, I'm 53. Yeah, look at yeah, look, shit's changing. Instead of like,
Right. Saying what it is and what it isn't, right? Because you don't want to be, treated like a senior citizen before your time. But at the same time, you don't want to try and pass or trying to pretend that you're younger than you are for some reason, as if it's this shameful thing,
right,
right? I mean, aging, I say this in my show, that you know, I'm not afraid of the thing that society keeps on telling me I'm supposed to be afraid of, which is aging, right? I'm afraid of dying, but not living, right? I mean, aging is a privilege, and it should be treated like that. And I think that, it's, I find it very suspect when there's these societal or media forces that try to distract women by turning their focus and their self-loathing towards themselves about these little petty issues about our bodies. That I think it's distracting us from really stepping into our power.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. If you keep us focused on, our under eye bags and our cellulite, then we're not focusing on inequity. Just keep us thinking about our cellulite, where we're just quieter. If you can just focus us on how big our butts are, then we're not worried about our artistic accomplishments, whether we get the same airspace as a man.
Right. And I wonder if this self-loathing is a misplaced anger over other things, right? And so again, if it could be directed outwards and focused, I really think that the world needs us. It needs more female energy. We are so out of alignment, we are so out of alignment with the way our political machines work, the way the war machines work, the way we treat our planet. I know those are big ideas, but I think that things would really shift drastically if there was more women at the helm of the ship.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think it's becoming safer, is lack of a better word, for a woman in the public eye to age? Do you think we're seeing more representation in media, film, television, theater? Because all I see is J-Lo, and J-Lo is clearly
Jayla's been 30 for the last 25 years, right?
she's got all the pharmaceuticals keeping her looking a certain way. And she's got
I
to be
don't
50,
know.
got to be our age, right? She's got to be 52, 50, some 53.
I think she's 55 or 56. I think that yeah. I mean, there's taking care of yourself, and then there's, completely unrealistic standards. I don't know. I hear people being a little bit bolder about self-acceptance and realistic presentations of women, but it very quickly in this capitalist society gets like consumed by an opportunity to like a new demographic to sell to, right? It's like, remember that Dove soap campaign that was like, it was like, it was trying to capitalize on, people being different sizes. But I can't remember how. Do you remember what the tagline was? It was something that ended up body shaming a different demographic, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I don't. I will have to look it
I
up.
don't know. I just feel very cynical about, this capitalist society. I think that there's always, like, once they've realized, like, oh, there's menopausal women and they're pissed, and they're like trying to sell us shit.
Oh yeah.
Right.
My algorithm, it's all hot flash relief and like,
It's so dumb. And you go into like Target, and then there's all these like large size mannequins and rainbows. I'm like, you guys, you guys. I mean, I don't think you're on my team. I think you're just trying to sell more stuff. I don't know, man. It stinks. So I don't know. I mean, I hope that the revolution will not be televised. I think that, the women really need to unify. And I don't know if it's about visual representation in this very, very, very visual centric world.
yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm hopeful. I see someone like Drew Barrymore aging relatively naturally, or appearing to look like a 46-year-old person on television and not look crazy and pulled, but at the same time, I see more and more use of regular people using filters and things on Instagram all the time. And I'm wondering if they don't even know like how weird the filter looks. And do they know that like no one would know that was them if they saw them in the grocery store? You know?
Right, right, right.
And I wonder
Yeah.
like how far we are from like having our mirrors be like literally the mirrors in our house being like digital mirrors that just show us what we think we look like rather than what we are. Or then I'm like, maybe we'll get nuked and we'll have to just all be hanging out with our cellulite, like just being like glad to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Seems unsustainable. It seems very unsustainable
I guess for myself, I want people to listen to what I have to say.
rather than look at you for what you look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe, maybe that's part of what um aging affords.
Yes. But I also feel like we're so conditioned to focus on superficial things more and more so with
Hmm.
social media that the algorithm discriminates against people who won't comply with an image, a quote unquote pleasing youthful image. And it's punitive
Yeah.
towards women who look 55 and up and prefers
Right.
people who look under 30.
Right. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that for
That
sure.
got super meta.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to, adapt to this ever shifting new normal, right?
Right.
And I think that everyone has a body. A lot of people go through different shifts and changes, but I don't know, it's real striking. I think my experience in a female body is just that, as soon as you get used to one thing, it's something else. It's pretty wild.
Have you done a one woman show before?
No, I never have. I've directed several one woman, I mean, not one woman, one person shows. It became something of a specialty. I worked with like maybe four different people because it's so different than directing a different type of work because you're not just the director, you're a dramaturge in some way, helping sort of shepherd the idea forward. And this one-on-one relationship is very intense. So I've done that maybe for the last 15 years or so. And then to be doing it myself is very interesting to be on the other side of it. And I'm working with a woman named Raquel Sion, who has been an actor, a friend of mine for many years, and was also a director, obviously, and a director of one person shows. So that's been really great to be working with another woman who I've known for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. And we did a couple of initial shows this spring in New York City. And our next one is on October 6th up in Saugerties, which is in the Hudson Valley. But I really hope to tour with it because, I'm hoping that my personal story is also a political and universal story in a way. And I really want to encourage women to have like I said, to step into their power and embrace their anger in a positive way, and that we can use it as a force for propelling our country into a more positive place. And my stealth mission, Kate, is that I feel like something that's really fallen off people's radar is the fact that the Equal Rights Amendment never got ratified in the United States of America. We are still living in a country where we do not technically have equal rights, right? I mean, equal rights are human rights. So when I say women don't have equal rights, of course, you can include non-binary people and trans people under that banner. But man, man, we need our rights. We really need our rights. And having our rights could make a huge impact on what happens in this country. If we had our equal rights, the issue of bodily autonomy would be out of the hands of the Supreme Court,
Right.
right? So this whole question of, if you have the right to choose or not would be removed from that very conservative court. And powerful changes have come in countries that have demanded some sort of parity in their political systems. Like in Mexico in 2019, they passed a law that mandates that all government positions be occupied at least 50% by women. And now they have a female president. Okay. And that's in a macho country.
Sure.
Women did not have the right to vote in Mexico until 1953. So don't underestimate the impactfulness of us finally enshrining the equal rights into our Constitution. I mean, equal pay and, on our healthcare system, but really on changing the way our government operates. I think that there's a lot of possibility for really impactful change through just that one legislation. So that's my little stump speech.
Yeah, I mean, it's bonkers that we don't have that. It's insane.
It's insane.
Insane.
The United States, the allegedly the most powerful country in the world. Okay. But there's something, maybe you're familiar with it. It's called the Gender Equality Index, and it measures how much rights or how much parity there is between the genders from country to country. Okay. And based on that scale, the United States is number 43 out of 195 countries in the world. It's number 43. So we're not number one, not by a long shot.
Not even the top 10.
No, not even the top 20, honey.
That's so depressing. I didn't know that.
But, this is somehow the brilliance of the, what do you want to call it? Brain fog descends upon me. The way America talks about itself, right? Like, we think about ourselves as being so free, but based on what exactly? Because we could walk down the street in booty shorts, or I mean, like, what is it that is like defining our freedom?
Right.
I mean, it's crap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So a woman of a certain rage, that's me. And I'd like to bring my show, especially to, this is why I was excited that you were in Florida, which I didn't quite clock for some reason, because there's, some states that never ratified the ERA, and Florida is one of them. And I would love to be able to travel to states where that is the case, only because I just think it's literally fallen off people's radar. I don't think it's something that people think about, and maybe they assume it already got passed, or maybe they think it's not really that impactful, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think people assume that it was passed. I think people don't even know, because we don't even learn about our own history. Like, we're not really taught about our own bodies. We're not really taught about how our bodies work. We're not really taught about how our country works or our country's history in any real and truthful way.
And there's so many distractions now. There's so many sparkly things vying for our attention. And I love a sparkly thing. Don't get me wrong, Penny. I love a sparkly thing. But I mean, there's some important issues that need to be addressed. And now that I am a woman of a certain age, it's really, I feel like it is my job to be impactful, at least in some small way.
Yeah. And I would imagine, just going back to a further piece of our conversation, I would imagine, as a woman working within the mainstream entertainment industry outside of burlesque, being a working actress is probably one of the most misogynistic spaces.
Of course, it can be a brutal field in many ways. There's lots of rejection. I mean, I've lived very much in these, experimental theater bubbles. I'm not in like some sort of version of chorus line, believe me. But I do know that that's very much the case. And certainly no accident that the Me Too movement, started within the entertainment industry, that people were finally so frustrated that they were willing to speak out at risk of their careers, because it's just been an epidemic of misogyny for years and years and years. You know who's rad? That Ashley Judd. She's really such a powerhouse and was, as you probably know, at the forefront of that Me Too movement. But just she has her hand in lots of righteous things. She's an interesting actor in that regard. Humanitarian.
Yeah. And you're now using your work to change the conversation, talk about things that have been pushed down, pushed aside. Issues like the ERA never being passed, which I think probably, I'm going to guess like 75% of the population doesn't even know that. That's a guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure statistically where things stand, but I just, there's so many things that are out of our control, right?
Yeah.
In a personal level and in a global level. And aging to me is about figuring out, how I can be, where I can drop my pebble in the ocean to cause the ripples that will be most impactful. I can't fix everything. I can't even begin to fix everything. About, it's so easy to get immobilized by the horrors of the world, right? So I think that doing small things is the only way, right? And it's funny. It's hard for me. I mean, my show is. I mean, I'm Gen X. It's funny. I mean, it's not funny. My show. It's a funny show, but to risk being not funny is also, at least for me, a challenge. To risk saying something serious and personal is really intense. Like sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But again, I feel like I believe that there's a greater good to sharing our collective truths, right? Beyond my own personal healing. I'm sure as a therapist, how many people struggle in silence.
Oh yeah. Most people.
And so I think we're better together.
Yeah, most people struggle in silence until they cannot anymore. And maybe this midlife wake-up call is that point where you just can't be silent anymore.
Right. I mean, again, in the thing that I've been thinking about that I put into my show is that, there's, when you go through menopause or perimenopause, you experience these moments of rage, right? They're called mood swings, right? Or irritability. And the narrative is that these are, moments of irrationality that are caused by hormonal fluctuations. But what if that's just been the stuff that's been bubbling inside of you for decades and it needs to come out? Maybe we need to listen to those voices. Maybe they aren't just being crazy.
Yeah, maybe it's something that needs to be finally uncovered and addressed,
like exercised.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
It's something I wonder about. I mean, it's not black and white. I mean, I'm not saying don't go on hormones. I'm saying, like, you need to feel crazy all the time. I mean, by no means do I want to imply that that's my point of view. but anger is an energy, that's what the old punk rockers said.
That was the Public Image Limited song.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you some questions I ask everyone. They're real silly questions.
Okay. Thank you for having me, by the way. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh my God, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Yeah, you've been on my list of people to try and connect with for a while, because I think we're on a similar wavelength.
We really are. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, but now I've put myself on tea. I've downgraded to tea.
Because the caffeine is just too much at this point?
Yeah, I'm trying to be more healthy. This is my green tea.
All right. We gotta make some adjustments, and that's okay.
And that's it.
You have a favorite snack?
Oh, that's interesting. You know, I am not that snacky.
Hmm.
That's so interesting. I'm not that snacky. I'll have a breakfast, I'll have a lunch, I'll even have a dinner. But snacks? I mean, I've I've spent the last dozen years, being part of the cleanup crew. So food often becomes like, you eat what the leftovers of what the kids have gotten finished with. So my snack might be whatever's left.
Oh.
How's that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Your children are how old?
Well, now they're 10 and 12, but believe me, I'm still at their service. Make
Oh,
no mistake.
10 and 12 is young. 10 and 12 are
Yeah.
kids. They're not launched yet. You still have a lot of responsibilities.
Yes, I do.
If you could give 30-year-old Kate Valentine a piece of advice, what would you give her?
Boy, 30. And when I was 30, I was living in Brooklyn and I had just connected with all of my burlesque crew, my East Coast burlesque crew. So Dirty and Julie and Bob and Tigger and some other folks.
The OG.
The OG, so lucky. Boy, I would just say, own it.
Cool. Yeah. It was a wonderful thing to own. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that you are incredible. I'm so happy to connect with you.
Yes, I hope that we can connect another time and talk about tarot stuff.
Yes, I would love that.
I would really love that.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife, and you can check out my offerings on my website, yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individual and small group coaching, as well as luxury retreats for women in midlife and beyond who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. You can book a complimentary discovery call in the calendar link in my show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. And I will talk to you next week.